And so let's get her right on here today. Dr. Vicki Rackner, are you still behind the scenes there somewhere?
I
There
am.
she is.
Hello, Patrick.
Hey, thanks for joining us today, Dr. Rackner.
It's a pleasure.
I know that all these people that are here, some of whom never type their name or anything else into the question box, I see dozens of people on here. So some of them are just lazy. They're looking at their email. They're watching cat videos. I don't know what they're doing right now, but they are all excited, I'm sure, to be here. We had, oh gosh, like 68 people registered for this webinar. So anytime we have a doctor on that talks about this business, they're pretty interested in that. So let me start with a quote from your latest book. This is The Myth of the Rich Doctor. And I think that subtitle's wonderful. Doctor, what is the state of your financial health? This quote, Dr. Rackner, is just awesome because it ties right in with our business. You're saying here basically that physicians in private practice walk away from an average of 30% of their income when they don't follow up on rejected insurance claims, which most of them don't.
Well, that's right. And it was just tax season. And I remember my own CPA when I was running my private practice said, don't worry about those rejected claims. It's a nice deduction on your tax return. And, I always just bought into that, never really critically thinking maybe there's a better way to do that. So here's the deal. I'm kind of the national expert on doctors and their relationship with money. The bottom line is that doctors have a dysfunctional relationship with money. And I will include myself in this. So when I was in my own practice, I was there to take care of patients. I wasn't there to keep track of the money. And in fact, I made some choices that were not always the most prudent choices. But outsourcing my medical billing turns out to be what I think was the single best decision I made as a surgeon. And so this book, The Myth of the Rich Doctor, is really about doctors and their relationship with money. And Patrick, since all of these people have invested their time learning more about ABS, how about if we just give them a copy of this digital book as my gift to them so that they can understand what doctors
Perfect.
are all about?
I've got a copy right here. I'll stick it in the handout section of the control panel there. So folks, just go look for that. You can click on it right now and download that. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so doctors know a whole lot about taking care of patients, but I will promise you that you know more about money, about how to make money grow, and how to run a successful business than doctors do. So you are in a great position of helping more doctors get back to the joy in medicine of taking care of patients, while you allow them to do things like not worry about how they're going to meet payroll and not worry about how they're going to retire. Doctors need this cash flow. They often don't know how, and they often don't even see what the problem is. So you can be there to make a huge difference in the lives of doctors, the patients they serve, and your community at large.
I love this title. This is just ingenious when you see this, The Myth of the Rich Doctor. I guess that's why so many doctors show up at the conferences where you speak on this topic, huh?
Yeah.
Because they thought they were going to be rich, and they're not, because of the cash flow is just not what it's supposed to be.
And everyone thinks they're rich. Patients think they're rich. The people who are collecting donations from the church, everyone thinks that doctors are rich. And we are very fortunate. I mean, when you look at our incomes, it's up there. But unfortunately, doctors have a really hard time translating their incomes into true wealth, into the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And unfortunately, there's an awful lot of doctors in private practice who, for whatever reason, are just willing to leave that money on the exam table. It doesn't have to be that way. And once they actually get the cash flow started, a lot of their problems are solved. And let me give you one specific example that I talk with doctors every day about, and that's physician burnout. It's toxic stress. According to a recent survey, about half of doctors are reporting feeling burned out.
Wow.
And a lot of them are thinking, you know what? I just want another career. Maybe they want to go into medical billing. Who knows? Who knows? I actually do know an ophthalmologist who did that. But they're saying, I want out. And if you look at why they're so unhappy, the amount that they're compensated is a big factor. The administrative burdens are a big factor. So once they outsource their medical billing, they get rid of a lot of the headaches that contribute to their burnout, and they turn around this cash flow issue. And that makes a huge difference, because when you're worried about money, it's sort of hard to stay focused on anything else. So, you potentially have the ability to radically transform a doctor's whole life.
And we've seen that, Dr. V. I mean, we literally have licensees that I've interviewed that have told me during the interview that they've had doctors send them gifts of all kinds saying, thank you so much for one licensee had a doctor, a lady who she had to give up her lease on her Mercedes, which she hated to do, but the cash flow was just down to nothing. And once the licensee got started, about 6 months later, she went out and was able to buy a Mercedes. So we can turn their lives around. We can change the way the whole community, is in response to the doctor, because doctors are sometimes going to work for hospitals and big groups. They're getting out of private practice because they don't have the cash flow that they used to when they first, got into practice, or thought that they were going to have. Well, look, let's jump right into our topic today. I titled this, Why I Outsource My Billing and Why All Doctors Should. You've already shared some reasons, but this is your latest book, 10 Critical Questions for Physicians in Private Practice. And the subtitle is, And the Single Choice That Can Help Your Practice to Prosper and Grow. And that choice is?
To outsource billing. So let me just briefly tell you my story. I was actually in a graduate program when I had my own surgical emergency. I was bleeding internally. By the time the doctors got into my belly, about half of my blood volume was in my pelvis. So I thought I was a goner. And I was so grateful to wake up that I just knew I was going to be a doctor, save other people's lives like my own had been saved. Not surprisingly, I became a surgeon. Now, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I don't want a boss. I don't want somebody telling me what to do and when to do it. So I knew that I was going to go into private practice, but I did have this insight to know that I should probably get a couple of years experience under my belt before I strike out on my own. So I joined another surgeon. This guy had, an office manager who basically did what she describes as everything except operate on the patients. So she did the scheduling, she did the billing, she did everything. And when I arrived, she was not real happy that I was there. And I wasn't there very long when she handed in her notification. So my partner's wife said, how hard can this billing stuff be? Why don't I just take some time off for my tennis game and come in and spend a couple hours doing the billing?
Oh my.
It was a complete nightmare. I mean, I went from taking checks home to making an owner investment to meet quarterly taxes. I mean, it was just a mess, and it created a mess in my life because everyone has financial obligations, of course. So we went and we hired a temp, by the way, who took care of the front office until we hired our new person. And we thought, wow, we just got the best temp in the world. She was so kind. She would go out into the waiting room and help the little old ladies fill out their paperwork. And we found the person that we were finally decided to hire. And a couple of weeks later, we got a call from that temp agency saying, we just found out that that woman that we sent out to your office is actually a convicted felon for Medicare fraud.
Oh my goodness.
She was probably out collecting the financial data for these little old ladies. And the instructions from the temp agencies was, take a careful look at your billing. And if you see any irregularities, let us know. Well, it's sort of like there were so many irregularities, it was kind of hard to say.
Oh gosh, what a nightmare.
saw the underbelly of what could potentially happen when you try to take control of your billing by keeping it in-house. And after a while, I was offered the opportunity to set up an office at another hospital nearby that was starting a multidisciplinary breast clinic, and I wanted to be part of that. So I broke off and was on my own. And the first decision I made was I was going to outsource my billing. I mean, I had seen all of these nightmares. I had seen all of these bad things that can happen by keeping billing in-house. And I decided, I do not want my cash flow trickling or even stopping because of some personal thing. Somebody got sick, or somebody's going on vacation, or somebody quit. And that turned out to be the single decision, I think, that really set me up for practice success.
That's a great story, because here, I've been saying this for years, and when I met you a few years back, I just thought that is incredible that you are telling us exactly what we used to tell people just from our own experience. My wife used to do medical billing, back in the late 80s, 90s, and we ran into those problems. Doctors all the time were saying, oh, I can do it myself, and it's cheaper, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, they can't. You can actually do it cheaper by outsourcing it, because you turn it over to somebody who's an expert. Plus, they get in more money than you could with your own staff. So,
well, Patrick, what I believe is that what doctors most want is to be in control. And they have this illusion that by keeping things in-house, they have more control. But my own experience really tells me that if you want to have control, you put it in the hands of the experts, you have checks and balances, and you've got somebody whose only job it is to assure that the money that you're owed comes into your practice.
Right, that they're focused on just that one thing. Plus, they do it for probably several other doctors as well. And the people inside the office, let's face it, they don't really have any real motivation to collect as much money as they can, because the pay's the same, right? They get an hourly wage, and it's the same no matter how much they bring in for the doctor.
Yes, and then, there's a lot of good people out there, right? But one of the huge risks that doctors face is the risk of fraud and embezzlement. If you take a look at all, direct-to-consumer industries, medical practices suffer from theft and fraud more than any other trade or association. And the reason is obvious. If you're gonna do bad stuff financially, you want to go where the money is. And 9 out of the 10 top earners in the US call themselves doctor. So, I actually had somebody do a little cartoon with, somebody with a white lab coat, and on the back it had, a target that says sue me. So, doctors really are the targets of all sorts of unsavory people who want to take advantage. And we doctors tend to be kind of trusting. So we're even at more risk.
Yeah, this is an illustration that's from your myth book, I believe. And can you kind of explain what this is talking about here? It looks like a lot of different icebergs that the doctor can run into here.
Right. So the title of this cartoon is Navigating to Wealth. And doctors have to navigate around all sorts of obstacles to get there. Number one lifetime expense are taxes for physicians, and probably for most people. And what a lot of physicians don't know is that they could probably ethically and legally reduce their tax burden by 30 to 90% by just taking advantage of the tax code. Right. But, again, focusing on taxes is important. For doctors in private practice, though, this theft and fraud and this leaving money on the exam table really is their primary obstacle. I mean, can you imagine any business? I just was flying. Can you imagine Alaska Airlines saying, it's okay, we'll just write off that 30%. We're not really going to collect it. I mean, any business person would be crazy to do it. Yet, many doctors do exactly that. So these are a number of the obstacles that doctors have to get around. And a lot of what ABS licensees is to help doctors in private practice specifically navigate around some icebergs that can, quite honestly, derail careers for physicians.
Yeah, I ran across this quote here from Medical Economics magazine. If you operate a medical practice, it says you should be outsourcing. Almost 80% of survey participants, these were doctors they interviewed, felt positive about outsourcing for your medical practice. It not only frees up your employees' time to work on the tasks they were hired for, but it also unkinks your cash flow. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into the questions here that are covered in your book, the 10 critical questions for physicians. We don't have to go into detail, of course, because we hope that people on the webinar today become licensees and get a copy of the book, of course, because we're going to show them here in just a little while how they can actually use this as a marketing tool. I think it was an ingenious idea that you had. So let's talk about this first one. Question one, are you utilizing the right person to get the job done right? You obviously just illustrated that, where you can hire the wrong person, obviously.
Right. Okay. So what I've done in this book is I've just reflected on what should physicians be asking if they really want to achieve success? Like what separates the hobbyists, the physicians who really are not generating the revenue that they want, and the doctors who are really thriving. And the first difference is successful doctors pick the right person for the right job. So I know, for example, that I do some things very, very well. There are other things that I don't do so well, and my life works better when I outsource the things that I don't either have the skill for or the interest in doing. Now, doctors are smart. There's a lot of things that they can do. I was just out speaking in Seattle on Monday, and one doctor mentioned, well, of course, I manage my own money. I build my own wealth because nobody cares about my money as much as I do. And the senior mentor just said to him, wait a minute, you're an expert at operating. Why in the world would you want to be spending time picking mutual funds when you can hire somebody else to do that so you can really spend your time doing what you're good at? So I don't think any doctor considers themselves prime business owners, prime entrepreneurs. And when they outsource it, it works better. So doctors don't do their own taxes. They could probably, get a copy of TurboTax and have their office manager do it. They outsource it to the CPA because that's what the CPA does day in and day out. And in general, the people who do things day in and day out get better results. So Patrick, you were mentioning that a lot of licensees, don't just work for, one OBGYN. They work for 10, 20 OBGYNs. And if you're doing billing for OBGYNs day in and day out, you sort of have a sense of what to expect from that practice, what to expect from that billing. And I'll tell you, the doctors who are audited are often the outliers. They're the people who are billing way more than any of the other doctors. And doctors do not want to be audited. I mean, think about the IRS auditing you. Then multiply that by 10, and you have the anxiety that doctors have around having their billing being audited.
Yeah, that kind of leads us into the second question in the book. How are you creating checks and balances to prevent fraud and theft?
Right, exactly. So physicians do know that they are vulnerable. And I will tell you that one of my colleagues is out on disability leave. She found out that her trusted office manager had embezzled her entire retirement.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And that was so devastating for her that she's actually out on a mental health disability. So, I've been taken advantage of. I know. I remember coming from the hospital back over to my office. I had to go through the parking lot, and there's this crying woman. I went over and I asked her, like, what's wrong? And she said, Oh, well, my son's at Children's Hospital and I don't even have the money to buy gas to get over there. So I just pulled out my wallet and emptied it and said, here. And I was feeling really, really good about myself until the next day in the doctor's dining room when they said, can you believe that woman is back in the parking lot with that same scam? Who falls for that? Like, right here.
That's me. I would have fallen for it too.
So anyway, we do know that we could potentially be targets. And remember I told you about the office manager in that very first practice I joined. In retrospect, I think what had happened is that she had been embezzling for a while. And with me coming in and me asking questions, I think she was concerned that she was going to be found out. I mean,
Right.
she, she was always the first in the office, last to leave, never took any vacations. There are warning signs for doctors. But the thing is, if you really want to keep honest people honest, you set up checks and balances. And when somebody is collecting copays, sending out insurance bills, collecting the money and making the deposit, when all of that is done by one person, you're basically giving, the key to the kingdom to potentially somebody unethical. So if you can set up a system to protect yourself against theft and fraud, this makes physicians feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, hey, I'm going to open up the question box if you don't mind, Dr. Vicki. I think if people are on here looking at getting into our business, they might even have a question directly for you. And so since it's live, we'll do that, folks. Just find the question box there, and I'll monitor it here on the screen while we go to the next question here. Here's number 3 from the book. What are you doing to minimize the risk of medical malpractice lawsuits and payer audits? Can you tell us what's a payer audit?
Okay, a payer audit is when somebody who pays those bills says, is everything really okay? Is everything on the up and up? And, there are some triggers for these audits. Most of them are secret. But what we do know is that these payers will just randomly choose people to audit just to get a sense of what the norm is. Getting an audit is just a nightmare for doctors. It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and doctors would just really rather avoid it. And what's your best protection? It's doing everything on the up and up, right? It's knowing what the rules are. It is not shortchanging yourself. It's being fair to yourself and being fair to the payers. So most doctors in their careers are going to be sued for medical malpractice. If you look at the numbers, this is just the sad reality.
Wow.
Now, what causes patients to go and find a lawyer? Well, there's an awful lot of patients who have bad outcomes who would never dream of suing their doctor. The people who go to lawyers, I think, are the unhappy people who are having a hard time being heard. And if you talk to lawyers, they'll say a lot of sort of the straw that broke the camel's back are billing issues. Like the office just was not listening to their billing concerns. They didn't try to get it straightened out. And, if you're outsourcing your billing, that means that there is somebody specifically there who wants to make sure that patients get that part taken care of and looked after. So it doesn't feel like it's as much of a burden or a problem for either the patient or the medical staff.
Here's a question that just came in from Anita. I think it kind of ties in with what we're talking about here, although I don't think it's specifically addressed in some of the questions, but it has to do with the costs involved. Let me throw this chart here on the screen. She says, doesn't it cost a whole lot less for the doctor to do it inside their office with their own staff? And so, I've shown this chart before showing, the in-house cost to do billing on the left there versus the outsourcing cost. This is all based on some numbers that you folks can get from our website if you go out there and research it there on our website. But anyway, the bottom line is that the doctors could save half as much by outsourcing their billing as controlling it you mentioned control earlier. That's important to a doctor, but they don't realize they have more control when they have a cloud-based system that they can access anytime, 24/7, to see the status of their claims within our system. But anyway, I'll just leave that up there while we're talking a little bit more. Okay, so
hang on just a sec, because this is really important. Okay,
Yeah.
what did I care about as a doctor? I cared about a single number, the amount of money that was in my checking account, right?
Right.
And what I wanted was to have the maximum amount of money in my checking account. So these numbers here are just talking about the cost of doing the bills. But if your in-house staff is not following up on 20% of the claims, this is not a fair comparison, right? Because this
Right.
is just a fraction of the difference that's going to show up in your checking account at the end of the month.
Yeah, that's a good point. They leave that 20, 30% on the table, so to speak, because there's so much happening in a doctor's office. I mean, it's just crazy sometimes when I go in there how much is happening. And so I don't think they can focus on the cash flow because they're focused on the care of the patient, which is what they like to do and want to do.
Right. And Patrick, I know that you've told me stories about doctors who were worried about their cash flow. And so, they went to the bank to take out a line of credit to make sure that they'd be able to meet payroll, never asking the question, well, gee, what if I just collected what I was owed for the services that I delivered?
Right.
Again, this underscores the financial literacy of doctors and the way that they're just not running their practices like true businesses.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they didn't have a lot of training in business. I don't guess you did, right? In zero, huh? And so they're focused on what they learned, which is how to take care of patients.
Right.
Let's see. Let me glance at a couple of other questions here. Alex is asking a question here. It's a great one. Medical billing outsourcing seems like a mature industry, which it is. It's been around. Well, my wife and I did it back in the 90s, so that's a long time ago. Why now is a good time to join? Well, I mean, Alex, you can think of it this way. There's all kinds of industries out there that have their ups and downs. The thing is about this is that doctors always need even cash flow. If they don't, then they can have some serious cash flow problems and staffing problems, and they can't grow, they can't buy new equipment. So cash flow is the bottom line. It's a mature industry and it's been around there a lot, but not the way we do it. The comparison between what our licensees can provide for doctors' offices versus just to quote a medical biller is just tremendous. And that's, again, part of why we do these webinars, to kind of educate people on that. And one of the things is the way we market to doctors, which is using books like this as a marketing tool. Let me just kind of jump to that. I think.
Might I offer a little something else?
Yeah.
Okay, so the doctor prospects fall into one of two camps. There are people who have their billing in-house and things aren't quite working the way they want to, and so they're going to try outsourcing. So that's one set of buyers. But there's another set of buyers that are unhappy with their current method of doing the billing, whether or not it's outsourcing or maybe they bought an electronic medical record that they're not happy with. And these people are in transition too. So what you need are people in pain who are looking for better solutions, and it crosses across all doctors.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that we do well, here's the book, by the way. One of these is in the mail to you, Dr. Vicki. It's a proof copy that's, you should have it any day now. And look, on the back, we've actually positioned you, if you join us as a licensee, you actually can put your contact information here right beneath Dr. Vicki Rackner's blurb here. So you're on the book cover with a doctor. It doesn't get any better positioning than that, does it? Huge credibility.
Once your name is on the cover of a book, things are a lot different for you. You're seen differently. You're not seen as a salesperson. You're seen as an expert. And I just have to say, I have to laugh, but I was just on an airplane. I happened to be seated next to a physician. We started talking, and we talked for maybe a half hour before we finally admitted to each other that we were both physicians. And I asked what she did. She asked what I did. And I told her, and she said, I've heard of you. And it's pretty interesting to just kind of be random places and for people to have heard of me. So my name is a good one to be associated with.
Yes, yes. You've been out there. You've been publishing books, I guess, for 10 years or more. And of course, you've spoken all over the country, so doctors are aware of your name. So to have a book, folks, with a doctor's name on it that they recognize and your name on there as well, is just a tremendous marketing tool. By the way, Dr. Vicki, I just wanted to show those of you who've seen webinars with my son, Adam. He's the president of American Business Systems. He wrote the foreword to this book for you. So it's a great positioning tool. And when you get your name on the back like this, folks, it's a wonderful way to market your business. And what we do is basically educate doctors by giving them educational books and materials like this. They appreciate that. They don't want to be sold anything, but they'll sell themselves, on a book like that. Oh, hey, here's another question here. Henry says most of, if not all doctors, must have already some sort of internal staff who've been doing the billing for them. How would we tell them that we, the just trained, are better than their existing staffs? Many thanks. You mentioned this earlier, Dr. Vicki, and I tell people at the beginning of our training week that by the end of these 5 days, you'll know more than 90% of all the medical billers and office managers that are out there, because we can condense all this good information in that one 40-hour week.
Right. So a couple things to consider. First of all, when billing is in-house, that means that the physician is overseeing it, right? Because the physician oversees all employees.
Right.
I didn't want to concern myself with it, right? I just wanted it done. But second, I also knew about how many things I was expecting my office staff to do and to be. And quite honestly, patient care was at the top of the list. So, on the to-do list, billing just was not up there by my design. I wanted patient care to be first. And so I knew that by outsourcing the billing, that was going to be done right. And by the way, I was just a small office, right? And I'm like a lot of physicians in private practice. There are maybe 2 or 3 people. So we didn't have dedicated billers. We had dedicated hours, find the 3 or 4 hours a week when this would happen. But there's a real value in getting somebody who's trained. And remember, when you become an ABS licensee, it's not like you're on your own. You have all sorts of helps and prompts to make sure that you're doing this right. And these are resources that the average biller in a private practice does not have access to.
You've thought of stuff that I hadn't even thought of. It's a great point, that being a part of the nation's largest network of medical revenue managers, that's us, you become the expert. It's amazing how little training some of those people inside of a doctor's office have. They were trained by the person who was doing the billing before they hired them. Usually it's on the job training. And it's not like they've all gone through some course and, have a degree in medical billing or anything like that. It's just a learned thing. It's not rocket science, actually, the actual billing. But the managing of the revenue for the entire practice, that's something you have to have, some experience doing. Well, if you don't have the experience, you can rely on us. We do have the knowledge and the expertise.
Right. And think about somebody who's doing billing in a private practice. They want to look good in the eyes of the doctors, right? So if collections are, only 70 or 80%, are you going to go to the doctor and say, hey, I think we've got a little problem here. What are we going to do about it? No, because that makes them look bad. But, the system of ABS offers an incentive for everybody, because if you get a percentage of what you are collecting, now everyone's on the same page, right? Everyone's intentions and rewards are aligned. So I think that this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and since you're actually billing the doctor for a percentage of the revenue collected for the doctor, you have an incentive to collect every dime you can, right? Where the staff doesn't have that. Like I mentioned earlier, the pay's the same. And besides, they see the doctor driving that new Mercedes, and you're driving a Kia, and they go, that doctor doesn't need to make any more money. I don't need to work that hard to get more funds in for that doctor. Hey, here's a great comment. Alex says, thank you, Dr. Rackner and Adam, for writing the book, I guess. Alex also says, what percentage of doctors still do the billing in-house? We found from our licensees nationwide, and we've got people from coast to coast, that it's about half and half still. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not doctors who get into practice and the first thing they want to do is do their own billing, but they soon will learn that it's better to outsource to someone else who is trained and specialized in that field. And so our licensees are signing up doctors every day all over the country, even though most of them are doing it either themselves or maybe they've already decided to outsource it to another company. We have ways of showing them that we're better than the competition that's out there. Let's see. Gira, hope I'm saying that right, says, is the ABS medical billing system restricted to private practice or any future scale up to hospitals? Well, we actually have a system that can bill for hospitals, but that's not your immediate market, believe me. As a beginner, you'd want to start with private practices, 1 to 6 doctors, something like that, probably, because hospitals have their own multi-million-dollar systems, don't they, Dr. Vicki?
They do.
And dozens of people probably who are doing the billing. That would be a tough one. You'd be months going through all the board members trying to get approval to outsource billing for a hospital. But we do have a system that's available to do that. By the way, our technology partner is the world's largest provider of medical billing systems for hospitals. So we can get you in. If you have the in, we can give you the system that lets you do that. Here's a good one from, let's see, I'm saying it's Sam Samusi. Samusi? I hope I'm saying that one right. As a licensee, what risks of lawsuits would I be exposed to as I bill for my clients? Maybe you want to address that, Dr. Vicki. What kind of risks are there out there? There are some.
Well, of course. I mean, living is dangerous. Anytime you do anything, you run the risk of being sued.
Right.
And as a business owner, I can tell you that I have an errors and omissions insurance policy. Doesn't cost very much. I have not actually heard of any outsourced biller being sued. Have you, Patrick?
No, in 25 years, we haven't. So I don't think the risk is there, but I can see how people think that there is a risk there. As long as you're putting in what the doctor gives you to put in and you're not just making stuff up, if you're not committing fraud, you don't have anything to worry about. Okay, let's see. Let's jump to this question here. What are you doing to manage staffing issues and assure that your practice runs smoothly?
Yeah, so I had told you the sad story of my launch into my surgical career. And boy, there were a lot of bumps on the road, right? And what I wanted was for my practice to run smoothly. Now, I understood that people get sick. I understood that people go on vacation. I understand that people's husbands get transferred. But every time something like that happened, it was a big disruption in my practice.
Yeah.
And so if I could set up systems so that things would move smoothly when life did what life does, that made me happier.
Sure. Well, that's why you said earlier that doctors don't, they don't do their own taxes, or they shouldn't. They could outsource that to a CPA. They could clean their own windows, I guess, if they wanted to, but it doesn't make sense. You can outsource a lot nowadays. I'm at the point where, when I was younger, even I got to the point where I would not change the oil in my car. I'd mess it up, and it would cost me more money probably than just paying somebody $20 to do it.
Right. There was recently an article from the Harvard Business Review, and the question was, how can you live a happier life? And the answer was paying others to do things that you don't like or you don't want to do.
Yeah. like mowing the yard. I'm at the age where I'm just not going to get out there in the heat and start up that mower because I can have it done, for a little price, of a small price nowadays. Uh, let's see. Let's talk about these HIPAA violations that we're talking about here in the book. What is that all about? Everybody knows kind of about HIPAA, but what does it
Right.
really do?
Right. So as you know, every time you go and see a doctor, you've got to sign this HIPAA form. And this form basically tells you that you have a right to expect that the information that you tell your doctor is going to be private. Now, I remember when I first got started, you'd walk onto the elevator and you'd hear doctors talking about patients there. I mean, just this idea of privacy was kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
But now things have really tightened up, and there are serious fines for HIPAA violations. So let me give you an example. An office manager went on vacation with her laptop. The laptop got stolen, which is always a pain in the butt. Except this was even more of a pain, not just for her, but for the doctor for whom she worked, because she had patient records on that computer. And there was
Oh my goodness.
okay, get this, $250,000 fine for each unsecured record.
Well, that would empty my bank account pretty fast.
Yeah. So doctors are very worried about this kind of thing, and a lot of them will get special protection against cyber security issues. But having medical records on the cloud instead of on a manager's laptop is a protective layer that most physicians should be taking.
Yeah, if they're using a system like ours that's HIPAA compliant, meaning it's been looked at by HIPAA and they've said, yes, you're following all the rules and guidelines for keeping that patient data private, then it's fine. We even have a service that you can offer to doctors because they probably have been using some other systems besides ours when you first meet them, that call Compliancy Guard, that helps them and their staff stay compliant. Now, Dr. Vicki, you're not going to believe this, but I went to a doctor myself here in the last couple of months. I'm in one room and they take me to another room and say, we'll be right there. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking up and there's this huge monitor that's on this stand of some kind that kind of just floats in the air. And on that monitor was another patient's record right there. That's a serious violation of HIPAA, isn't it?
That is.
I mean, you'll see that really more often than you think. Some of our licensees have said when they go out and just leave off some literature in some doctors' offices that they'll see patient forms and data just laying right there on the counter when they walk up to the window. And all that, if they do get audited by Medicare, I guess is who audits, they will be fined like $10,000 per infraction for that type of thing.
Right. And I think in the spirit of service, I mean, this is something that I do. You can decide if it works for you. But if I see something like that, I will say something to the doctor like, I know that you are committed to the delivery of high quality care. I just want to let you know I observed something that you probably want to take action on. And you probably want to hear from me rather than from some compliance department.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, I could have pulled out my phone and taken a picture of that, and I would have had that patient record, most of what medications they take and operations they've had and stuff that you just shouldn't have. Yeah. Alex says, what questions can be asked of a doctor to get an immediate feedback if they are a candidate for outsourcing their billing? We have a whole practice analysis that they can go through, but can you think of some questions that they might ask a doctor or an office manager to kind of get a feel for that?
Yeah. So a really great way of starting a conversation is, what's the dream that attracted you to a career in medicine? Follow-up question, how close are you to that dream? And oftentimes there's a really, really big gap. Yeah. And then you ask the doctor, what would you need to do to bridge this gap? And I can almost promise you that whatever they say, having more money is going to help with that. And then so you can ask, would you be open to a conversation about how I might be able to move you closer to the dream?
I like that. Yeah, that's really what they're thinking of is my dream is to do this or travel or whatever, and the only way they can do that is with enough cash flow. I've always said to my staff, look, as the CEO of our company, it doesn't matter what the problem is that you bring to me. If I have enough cash flow, I can usually solve it. Whether it's expanding, buying new equipment, hiring new people, it's all about the cash flow. So,
Right.
well, Dr. Vicki,
But
this has been yeah, go ahead.
what I was going to say is that, if you look at this data about burnout that we've already talked about, what's the number one reason that doctors are unhappy? It's the administrative burdens. And so you can ask a doctor, what if some of that were off your plate? What would your life be like? And let them really imagine what their life would be like. It's a very attractive value proposition for most doctors.
Yeah, Alex is saying, asking what questions. Actually, Alex, we have what's called a practice analysis. We go through this in the training. And over the years, we've developed this. It's now like 3 pages long. You don't have to ask all the questions, but it gives you enough information to ask questions that does zero in on whether or not they need help. And when you come back with the report that it generates, you're going to be surprised as well as they that you could probably increase their revenue considerably. So, Dr. Vicki, I'm going to let you go. It's 10 minutes till. I think Eric is going to be on here soon. He's going to kind of take over and wrap up, and we'll answer any other questions that come in. So, folks, thanks for being on here today. Thank you for being on here with us, Dr. Vicki.
My pleasure. This is a great business opportunity. I'm a serial entrepreneur myself, and this ABS sort of checks all of the lists that I look at when I decide whether to invest in a business opportunity. So I appreciate the opportunity of being with you. Doctors really do need people who do outsourced medical billing, and those people make a big difference. So thanks again for the chance to come and share my ideas.
Thank you again for being with us.